Salut tout le monde! Welcome back to Unintentionally Frenchify. I just got back from a trip to Switzerland. I stuffed myself with food. I drowned myself in fondue. It was amazing. I had zero expectations about Switzerland before going, and I didn't know that much about the country. I did know that it bordered 5 other countries, that there were multiple languages that were being spoken, that it was absolutely worth it to stuff myself with chocolate. But for the most part, we were going to visit family, and besides knowing that we were going to the Swiss-German part of Switzerland, I didn't really have, any expectations. And so my reactions and my thoughts on the similarities and the differences between the US and France were very, very spontaneous. So I'm excited to jump into this video today to share some of my reactions with you, my thoughts, get your feedback as well. So if you're ready, why wait? C'est parti. So the first thing I was surprised about was how everybody follows the rules. And I had this encounter right when we got to the airport. Our cousin came and picked us up, and we were pushing Eleanor in her stroller, and for me, going to the closest escalator, because coming from Paris, you all know the problem if you live here, where there's just basically not elevators when we're talking about public transportation. I say all the time that I do not understand how people who have any type of handicap are able to take public transport in Paris, at least the subway or metro, because it's just not possible with the lack of elevators. And we get there and I see an escalator and I start walking towards the escalator to go with the stroller. And our cousin stops us and she says, "Oh, no, you can't take the escalator. It's against the rules." And I was like, "It's fine, the escalator's here. I take Eleanor on the escalator all the time, we'll be fine." She was like, no, you can't take the escalator. There is a fine, and it's like a pretty hefty fine. We'll find an elevator, don't worry, there's a lot of them here. And I was like, what? Like, people actually follow like the escalator rules, and on top of that, there's like a really big fine. And I come from the US, we follow rules in the US. I'm not saying that we don't. We follow rules much more than people follow rules in France, and we're not debating rules all the time and deciding if we think we should follow the rules or not. For the most part, we do. But an escalator rule, to me, in like the list of priority of rules, here's really important and here's like less important, I would say it's more on the less important, and I wouldn't be so inclined even in the US to follow that. And here, this was the running theme of the weekend. We followed all the rules. Like, nobody was crossing the street when it was red. Everyone was respecting like the difference between first class and second class when they got on the train. And people even waited in a straight line for the bus. Before I jump into number 2, which is actually a very big similarity with the US, I want to talk to you guys about Lingoda. Because whenever I go to another country where I don't speak the language, which actually has not happened a lot in the last couple of years, I'm sure you all understand and can relate, thank you COVID. But when I do go to a country where I don't speak the language, it really reminds me of when I first moved to France, when I didn't understand anything, when I was very overwhelmed, and when I felt like I had spent already 2 different times trying to learn French, and I hadn't really managed to catch on, and I just really hadn't found the right setup for me and felt like I was just never gonna be able to learn. If this isn't the first video of mine that you've seen, then you've probably already heard me talk about Lingoda. They are the #1 online language learning school, and I'm constantly raving about Lingoda because they have this amazing, flexible opportunity to learn a language anywhere in the world with very small, intimate class sizes, native language speakers, and just this great atmosphere to motivate you to learn a new language. There are so many student reviews on their websites. If you need any alumni testimonials, go check them out. Now, Lingoda still does all of those things, but if you happen to be somebody like me who's gotten an itch to learn a foreign language, and maybe you've already tried once, or maybe twice, maybe already 5 times, and for some reason right now, you either went abroad recently post-COVID, or there was a foreign film festival in your town and it gave you the itch to learn a language again. If you're motivated to try it again, do not give up. This is the moment to jump on board. Lingoda has lots and lots of opportunities that really allow you to personalize the way that you're learning. So whether it's a group setting or a private class, an intense sprint program over 2 months, or the same amount of classes over 5 months. Or if you want to focus on vocabulary first and then maybe pick up grammar second. you can basically build your own curriculum. And hey, if you want to learn slang from Argentina instead of Spain, they have teachers for that too. Basically, they're really trying to allow everybody to customize their language learning journey in a way that fits them best so that they stay motivated, so that they start reaching their goals, and so that they just continue pushing forward. They're really giving everybody the opportunity to learn a language no matter where you are and how you learn. So if that's you, if this interests you, if you want to learn Spanish or English or French or German, check out Lingoda today. They have a 7-day free trial offer going on right now, and with the link below in my YouTube description, you will also automatically get 30% off of the first month of your payment following that free trial. It is that simple, so don't hesitate to go click and check it out. All right, now back to Switzerland. The second thing that struck me right away, I said it the literal moment that we walked outside of the train station and we were walking down a street to go to our cousin's house, was the amount of flags here. I come from super patriotic America, right? We've got flags everywhere. Anytime I go home, for all of you Midwesterners or maybe just Americans in general watching this video, I go home and I die at the amount of American flags waving in car dealership parking lots. I do not know what specifically it is about car dealership parking lots, but also at people's homes. I mean, everywhere. In France, you normally only see French flags if it's a big holiday, of course, or on governmental buildings. You don't just see them everywhere. And in Switzerland, they are everywhere. There were so many, and not just Swiss flags, actually, there were so many Ukraine flags as well. I mean, blowing everywhere, every time we walked out of buildings, out of personal buildings, out of the government. I could not look in a direction in the town without seeing at least, no exaggeration, 5 flags. I really felt at one point when we were in Switzerland like I was back in Poitiers when I first arrived in France 11 years ago, and I was really surprised because a lot of the stores were closed on Saturday afternoons, all day Sundays, or maybe they were open on Saturdays, but then Monday morning they were closed. And we got there and our cousin goes, oh, so I stocked up on everything that we're gonna need for the weekend for us and the girls, because basically everything is shut the entire time that you're here. And granted, we were there on an Easter weekend, but we were there for 5 days. I wasn't expecting everything to be closed the entire 5 days we were there. And honestly, most things were. There were restaurants that were open for sure, but there wasn't any shops open. There weren't a lot of grocery stores open, just emergency things. I mean, things were shut down. And obviously the US is just very much not like that. It's such a consumer country that, and way of doing things, that everything's about the convenience of the consumer and how to make us, buy more and consume more. And that's not at all the case in Switzerland, at least for my 5 days there. It didn't feel that way over the Easter holidays. And so that reminded me a lot more of France. I'm always super surprised when I look over and I see what I consider to be babies buying alcohol. And of course now I'm in my 30s, so let's be honest, everybody who's 18 looks like a baby compared to me. It's oh, is that still my face? But what I thought was kind of interesting is when I was in Switzerland, I saw some young kid buying alcohol and I was like, well, what's the age for buying alcohol here? Because obviously in the US it's 21, which is just crazy for the rest of the world, but in France it's 18 for drinking. And they're like, oh no, here you can buy beer and wine at 16, so that kid's probably 16. And I was like, what? I'd never even heard of any country where you can buy alcohol legally at 16. I was like, wow, this is way younger. Why do you think it's so much different than France? And then newsflash, she was like, no, but in France, you can buy beer and wine at 16 too and drink it at home. The only thing that you can't do is you can't drink, in a bar or in a restaurant until you're 18. And you can't buy hard alcohol until you're 18. Honestly, I had absolutely no idea that that was a law in France, and not that it mattered since I was over 18 when I was here, but I always thought that the drinking age was 18 in France, and that meant both buying, even if you were consuming at home, or consuming in a bar, and apparently not. So interested to know if you guys knew that little trivia fact as well. Staying on the theme of drinking, I was also very surprised by the amount of people in Switzerland just drinking in public. Drinking in public in the US is definitely not as common as it is in France. In a sunny day in Paris, the amount of people that are out at the park, sitting along the canal, having a picnic, God knows where, and they popped open some wine and they popped open beers and they've got cocktails. You see that everywhere. But in France, you're never really sure when somebody's gonna come and ruin your day and tell you, actually, you shouldn't be drinking here. Actually, from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. in front of the Eiffel Tower, you can't. You're not supposed to have have glass bottles? Why do you have glass bottles? There's definitely someone who's coming and trying to kind of corral everybody in and, you know, enforce some rules that probably do exist, even if everyone's ignoring them. In Switzerland, it's not the case. They are definitely really okay with people drinking, especially since we know they're all rule followers, and they drink in all kinds of places. We spent a lot of time because our cousin has kids, and we brought Eleanor, and so we spent a lot of time in parks, and everybody had, you know, beers, the parents were out drinking, they were out playing with their kids, and it was just like alcohol, you know, just in a basically non-bingy type of way was everywhere. Also, another great transition to my next point, the convenience of having children when we were in Switzerland. It was amazing. And it reminded me honestly a lot more of the US. You know, we could easily find high chairs in restaurants. There were kids biking around everywhere all the time. There were places where we could sit down for an apéro and have a drink that were in front of playgrounds. When we were at the airport, there was a playground. When we were at the zoo, there was a playground. There was just a lot of things done so that parents could really enjoy time together socializing and didn't necessarily need to have a babysitter or not have their kids around. And it's not convenient like that in Paris. And I can't say for the rest of France because I don't, you know, haven't lived there with a child, but you know, it's hard to find a restaurant in Paris that for sure has a high chair, and it's hard to have space because we lack space and there's less parks, and it's just globally, you know, as I said, there's not a lot of elevators. It is not convenient, I don't find, to have a child in Paris. It's not made to be convenient. And so, you know, it was interesting to be in a European setting where I felt like there was a lot of convenience around being a kid, because I haven't felt that around having a kid, because I haven't felt that really in France. I'm very interested for those of you that do have children in Paris or in France in general to give me your opinion on this. I knew the Germans and Swiss were known for being on time. And I remember this because I remember learning about how many watches were made in Switzerland, but I'd completely forgotten about that when I came. And one of my first encounters with this was when we were in what would be like their metro. So it was really like if we'd been in the metro in Paris, we were waiting for, you know, the subway to come, and all of a sudden I could not just see the name of the metro that was arriving and the time, but I could also see how late it was. And I thought that was super interesting because yes, when you go to like a big train station here in France, you'll see, you know, the name of the train, where it's going, its train number, what time it's supposed to leave on. And then often like at an airport, it flashes if it's late and it tells you if it's on time or whatnot. But in France, when it comes to metros that are supposed to be running every 3 minutes or every 5 minutes or maybe every 7 minutes, nobody's telling you if those puppies are on time or not, because nobody really cares. And I know in other cultures, I've heard a lot of stories about Japan and how they're on time as well when it comes to their railways and things. France is just so the opposite of it. And then we've got the US, whose public transportation in terms of trains isn't even anything worth discussing. So it was a really, really funny, I don't know, not necessarily culture shock, but just a little, you know, tidbit that I wasn't expecting that I thought was kind of cool. And this last one is about making friends in Switzerland. So this is 100% not based on my own experience, but what I was hearing from different expats that we met, and also from different Swiss Germans that we met that had moved to Zurich and the suburbs and that had tried to make new friends. And basically everyone said it is very, very hard to make friends there. And at first I thought it was a bit like in France, because like, oh yeah, it's really hard to make friends in France too. And some of these French expats were like, no, you know, it's not necessarily what it's like in France, because if you give it some time and you push and push, eventually you do make friends, which is something I would agree with. I tell all of you guys all the time, give it 2 years, 3 years, and at some point you will have French friends. It just takes longer for them to warm up. Well, in Switzerland, or at least the German part of Switzerland, they were like, that's not even the case. I'm Swiss German. I moved to, you know, Zurich. I didn't grow up here. It is so hard to make friends with even people, you know, that are Swiss German. I speak their language. It's my mother tongue. It's nothing about that. It's just that we tend to be a culture that are a bit more closed off, and we do a lot of things in family, and we don't, you know, we don't have a lot of room in our lives to make a lot of new friends as we're adults. So that was also something that, you know, reminded me a bit more like France, but was actually even more on an extreme than the French, that I was kind of surprised about, because I didn't know you could be more extreme than the French in terms of, you know, waiting to make friends. All right, so that's a wrap, guys. Very much looking forward to hearing what you guys know about Switzerland, or some of the things surprised you or not. Don't forget about Lingoda. You've got a 7-day free trial and 30% off with the link in my YouTube description, so check that out below. And otherwise, have a fabulous week, and I will see everybody la semaine prochaine. Bisous!